Okay, thank you. Um, this was a hard one to write in view of where we've all been for the last few weeks, uh, and I had some reservations about it, but here goes anyway. Words, just words. We can't do without them. Sometimes there are no words. Sometimes there are not enough, and sometimes there are too many. On my desk, when I can find it, there is a heavy glass paperweight printed with the words, "Good writing is clear thinking made visible." In a 1 inch Baroque frame are words in a 1 inch square, and those words are, "Do this much." So the first object is to remind me to think with clarity. The second one stands as an oasis when there are too many writing projects to do and too much to do around the house and the whole thing. Do this much really helps to have that right there on my desk. With that relationship of thinking clearly and the value of calmness when there is too much work, I want to speak on what makes some words worth hearing and attending. We can't listen to all of them, there are too many. But like the little framed command suggests, be picky and begin somewhere. And the paperweight suggests, think. Madeline Dean is a professor of writing at Philadelphia University and a member of the impeachment trial team. She spoke on television saying, "Liz Cheney, read her words." She speaks to Lawrence O'Donnell, the host of a show, and says, "I know you are someone who prizes words." Cheney's words, said after the attack on the nation's capital, shook the foundation of the Republican Party. And then there were other things that happened in that same week that changed everything. Then another guest on the same show, Anand Giradis, spoke on some of his recent writings to Lawrence O'Donnell, and he read them after Lawrence O'Donnell read them. This is not the chaos of the beginning of something. This is the chaos of the end of something. It's not the engine of history. It is a revolt against the engine of history. We are living through a revolt against the future. The future will prevail. Then Arnand spoke extemporaneously and expanded on the ideas he had written and that Lawrence O'Donnell had just read. People have encountered race in the workplace and social settings like never before, unlike 10 or 15 years ago. These people are not the future. They are the barnacles on the future. We are witnessing a backlash. The future will happen with them or without them. We are trying to build a country that looks like the world. These people are terrified of a future in which they have to share. Arnand is the publisher of a newsletter, the Ink newsletter. It's like think newsletter, the Ink newsletter. I love that. In the first reading, we have what can be compared to a creation story that tells how the world began. In the beginning of creation, when God made heaven and earth, God was the creator with the darkness over the face of the abyss. The images claim our imagination without form and void. The face of the abyss, a mighty wind, let there be light. Light and dark were separated and named. This is the Old Testament. The second reading is from the New Testament. When you hear the word, see it capitalized. When all things began, the Word already was. The Word dwelt with God, and what God was, the Word was. The first one sounds like the Big Bang with God in charge, and the second one like the Word. John was an apostle, And this is the gospel according to John. I'm hardly a theologian, but I think the word has to do with the prophecy of Jesus. This text is less about the face of the deep and wind and light and dark. This text is also about when things began, but the emphasis is on language and the power of the word, and maybe how the word quickened the womb of a woman. Let's get back to that Armand barnacle metaphor and people who want to live in the past. I thought I knew what barnacle meant, but I had to look it up to make sure. There were two sets of definitions and four altogether that did not meet with what I thought I knew. Did you know that the first definition of barnacle is whoops, um, is a oh boy, I've got a missing page here or something. Anyway, it's a goose, a black and white and gray goose, barnacle. Um, there's another one that is the bit of a horse, and there was one more. Um, Here's a second definition. Here we're getting there. A marine crustacean which attach themselves directly by a fleshy footstalk to rocks, ships' bottoms, or other objects. Here was Anand's barnacle, and the object it was attached to was the future. I kind of wish he had not made it a metaphor, because these are people he described. If he had made it a simile, a comparison, it might have been better. But then came the third definition: a companion or a follower who is difficult to shake off. That works if you think of people who are frightened of a kind of a future they believe will happen. Because I aspire to practice the behavior implied by the first principle, I have tried again and again to understand the thinking and beliefs of members of the extreme right and some GOP leaders. Arnon's words and the images they kindled helped somewhat, but I want to think of them as people, not barnacles. Yet his other images, the engine of history, backlash, terrified of the future, blended into some new understanding. When I asked, Tom Gelano sent me a video of someone explaining deep canvassing. Listening to a young woman who went out in the world unsure of what she was doing or how to do it was inspiring. She had a couple of other young women with her. In essence, she got people to talk about themselves, and most important, one person changed his mind. Not due to anything she said, but what he himself said. That caused me to think of the one time I had a similar conversation with a neighbor. I was much braver at that time, some years ago. Why didn't he believe that the state should accept an increase in Medicaid? I ask with the incredulity of one who has that edge to her voice whenever she believes she is right, and why can't others see that? My neighbor bent down slightly, looked me square in the eye, and said, I have worked hard my whole life for everything I've gotten. Nobody ever gave me anything, and I cannot see giving something to someone who never did an honest day's work. They just want something for free. So I thought about that. Lots of cliches. Who are they? Couldn't see a real starting point. I see, I said. Well, some people are not as fortunate or have the opportunities you and I have had. He grimaced, reared back, and I said, I understand, but I didn't. If I had practiced deep canvassing, maybe I could have got this man to talk about his life. What if I listened without judgment and asked him what his life was like growing up? Did his family have health care when his dad had the heart attack? Did he like the two Mexican farmhands? Who were his friends in school? Were they like him or different? It might have made a difference, but I didn't have the example of the young woman in the video when I talked with my neighbor a few years ago. I think if you and I, had started this deep canvassing maybe 4 years ago, something might have changed in the hearts of followers, but I'm uncertain even of that. Some of the barnacles have become predatory, I fear, and some learned people say that Trump was a symptom of what had long simmered underneath. Yet it was he who lit the match to the rag of racism and hate, and most of all, fear. The book Bob Woodward wrote that was published in 2018 had the title Fear. And here's the Trump quote that the title came from, that is on the back of the book, or the blurb of Woodward's book. Quote, "Real power is," and I don't even want to use the word, "fear," end quote. That was in March 31st, 2016, well before the election. More words. "Your words are putting you and your family at risk. We know where your kids are." That was an email with pictures of the homes of Congressman Jeffries and George Stephanopoulos. Quote, "Words remind us that darkness cannot drive out darkness and hate cannot drive out hate." President Biden. "Although democracy can be delayed, it can never be defeated." The Youth Poet Laureate, Amanda Gorman. "If enough of us come together, we can carry all of us forward." President Biden. "Public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost everything. Without it, practically nothing." Abraham Lincoln. Did that. "Let's begin to listen to one another. Hear me out. Take the measure of me." From President Biden's inaugural speech. "It was an attempt to overturn an elected government. That's a coup." Noam Chomsky. "The leaders of the Republican Party would rather throw democracy in the trash can than to speak out against domestic terrorism. And the terrorists do not believe in democracy either. They don't believe in it." Professor Eddie Glaude of Princeton. On the Holocaust Remembrance Day, Biden quoted his deceased longtime congressman friend, Tom Lampos, who said, "The veneer of civilization is paper thin. We are its guardians, and we can never rest." Here is a quote repeated in the House debate last Thursday. "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." Edmund Burke. One last quote by President Biden. Excuse me. "We will lead not by the example of our power, but by the power of our example." I want to close with a poem I wrote some time ago, but it seems to fit the collective psyche today, or at least mine. The title is Doppelgangers, which comes from the German and means a supposed spectral likeness or double of a living person. In other words, a ghost or a spirit of a living person. It was first published in New Letters in my book, Dinner in Oslo. Doppelgangers. When we walk with spirits, we walk with ourselves. Bidden or not bidden, God may be present. Who will close a door, open your mouth, move your hand? Like a man covered with bees, or a woman who says, "Don't touch me, don't talk to me, stay with me." Spirits break the white void with the words we say and think are understood, and they gather the words we don't say and bring them to us in tiny baskets, saying, "All you have done, all you have not done is forgiven. Blow, burn, make me new." Thank you.